Hey there, fellow dog lovers. Welcome back to our channel, where we celebrate the unbreakable spirit of our furry heroes. Today we're kicking off an epic tale that will have you on the edge of your seat, rooting for the underdog, literally. The air in the Silver Creek Police Department's auction hall was thick with a tense, expectant silence. It wasn't the usual buzz of a community event. It was the cold, sterile atmosphere of commerce. The auctioneer's voice, a rhythmic, authoritative chant, echoed off the high ceiling. But for 9-year-old Leo, it was just a deafening, painful blur. In his small hands, he clutched a worn-out piggy bank. Its once bright blue ceramic, now chipped and faded. He could feel the familiar weight of the coins inside a collection of every allowance, every birthday dollar, every single cent he had saved for one single purpose. This wasn't just an auction for a dog. It was a fight for a family member. For Leo, the story of his life could be told in 2 chapters. The first was filled with sunlight and laughter, with the easy, comforting presence of his father commander, Marcus Thorne. Marcus wasn't just a cop. He was a giant of a man with a gentle heart, the kind of dad who taught you how to skip stones on the lake and how to fix a bicycle chain. And he was never ever alone. By his side was Shadow, a magnificent chocolate Labrador with a soulful gaze and a tail that could wag its way right into your heart. Shadow wasn't just Marcus's canine partner. He was an extension of him. Their bond was legendary in the department. You'd often see them on patrol, Shadow sitting so calmly in the passenger seat, his head resting on Marcus's arm. At home, he was Leo's best friend. He would gently nudge a cold, wet nose under Leo's hand when he was sad, or bring him his favorite stuffed dinosaur when he had a bad dream. Shadow was the keeper of their family's joy. Then came Chapter 2. It started with a knock on the door, a phrase about a routine mission gone wrong, and the shattering of a boy's world. Marcus was gone. In the year that followed, Leo's world went silent. He stopped talking, stopped drawing, stopped doing all the things that had once brought him joy. His vibrant spirit was replaced by a quiet, heavy stillness. The only connection, the only lifeline he had left to the laughing, loving man who was his father was Shadow. The dog, too, seemed to carry a burden of grief. His playful spirit muted his eyes a little sadder. The two of them, the boy and the dog, were a silent monument to a loss too profound for words. And that's why Leo was here today, clutching his piggy bank as if it were a shield. He didn't know how much he had, but he knew it was everything. The auctioneer's chant grew louder. "We have 50,000. Do I hear 55? Leo's heart pounded. He had a few $100s. He knew he didn't stand a chance, but he had to try. He had to be here. A man in a sleek dark suit, Silas Vance, raised his paddle. He ran a private security firm and saw Shadow not as a hero, but as an asset, a valuable tool. Then from the other side of the room, an old weathered hand slowly rose. The man, Jonathan Reed, was a local who ran a small dog sanctuary. His face was kind, but his eyes were fixed on Shadow with a look of fierce determination. 55, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Hope, fragile and fleeting, flickered in Leo's chest. The bidding war escalated quickly between the two men, each number a cruel hammer blow against Leo's dream. Just as the auctioneer was about to announce, "Going once," a shocking, unexpected bid pierced through the tension. It was Jonathan Reed who stood up and with a voice that rang with conviction said, $60,000. The gavel came down, and for a moment, just a moment, a fragile hope emerged. But Leo's story, as you will soon learn, was not just about winning an auction. It was about a much bigger, much more dangerous game. A game where a silent boy and his grieving dog were at the center of a conspiracy that reached far beyond the small town of Silver Creek. And the fight to bring Shadow home was just the beginning. As the auctioneer's gavel fell, an eerie silence descended upon the room. The high bid from Jonathan Reed, the elderly dog sanctuary owner, had seemingly won. But in the world of big money and corporate greed, a simple win is rarely the end of the story. The truth behind the bids was darker than Leo could ever imagine. Silas Vance. The man in the sleek suit didn't want Shadow for a security firm. He wanted him gone. He was the CEO of a company called Ethelred Security, and he was working as a front for a major pharmaceutical firm, Lethbridge Pharmaceuticals. You see, Leo's father, Marcus Thorne, wasn't killed in a routine mission. He was a part of a special task force investigating Lethbridge for developing illegal, highly addictive designer drugs. Shadow, with his incredible nose, had been specifically trained to detect the unique chemical signature of these drugs. He wasn't just a dog. He was a walking, breathing piece of evidence. And to Silas Vance, evidence was a liability that needed to be erased. This is where the story gets complicated, and where we uncover a common heartbreaking mistake many people make. Leo's stepfather, Rick Thompson, saw things in a different light. He wasn't a bad guy. He was just a man trying to help a family he loved. He saw Shadow not as a hero, but as a painful anchor to the past. He believed that as long as Shadow was around, Leo would never be able to move on from his father's death. He honestly thought that by letting go of the dog, he was giving Leo the chance to heal and build a new normal life. But this thinking is fundamentally flawed. For people dealing with profound loss, a link to the past is not a chain. It's a lifeline. It's a physical embodiment of a bond that can never be broken. Rick's good intentions, however, were being exploited. He was subtly being manipulated by one of Vance's associates, a man who had been whispering in his ear for weeks. This associate had convinced him that the best thing for Leo was to simply move on and that he could secure a bright financial future for the family by cooperating. But Rick wasn't the only one with a secret. Jonathan Reed, the quiet man who won the auction, was also fighting for a purpose far greater than a simple act of charity. He wasn't just a sanctuary owner. He was a retired canine trainer and a close friend of Marcus Thorne. He knew about the drug investigation. He had helped train Shadow. And he knew something that no one else did. Maria, Leo's mother, was starting to piece things together. She had been suspicious of Rick's sudden change of heart about the dog. The pieces didn't fit. One evening, she overheard him on the phone, his voice low and strained. She followed her gut, and in a moment of desperation, checked his email. What she found was a bombshell. It was a message from Vance's company thanking Rick for his continued cooperation in persuading the family to relinquish the asset. The betrayal was not just emotional. It was a calculated, deliberate act. This revelation completely changed the game. Rick wasn't just misguided. He was being used. And in that moment, Maria realized they weren't just fighting for a dog. They were fighting for the truth, for justice, and for the soul of her family. This new revelation forces Maria and Jonathan to confront Rick, and from that confrontation, an unlikely alliance will be formed. An alliance built on a shared goal to expose the truth and bring Shadow home not just for a boy, but for a hero's legacy. 3. The unlikely alliance. The confrontation between Maria and Rick wasn't a shouting match. It was something far more devastating, a quiet, wrenching moment of truth. Maria didn't scream. She simply placed the printed email on the kitchen counter. Its cold black text, a stark, irrefutable proof of betrayal. Rick's face, a mask of weary confusion, just moments before, crumpled as he read it. There were no excuses, only a profound, gut-wrenching realization of his own misguided actions. He had been a pawn in a game he didn't even understand, a man who thought he was doing the right thing for his family, only to find he had been helping to dismantle it. In that silence, a new kind of alliance was forged. It wasn't one of strategy or shared ambition, but of shared humility and a desperate need for redemption. Rick, broken but no longer blind, joined Maria in her quest. They both knew they couldn't win this alone. Their first stop was the Silver Creek Dog Sanctuary. The air was calm, filled with the gentle sounds of contented dogs. Jonathan Reed, the man who had won the auction, was waiting for them. He wasn't surprised by Maria's anger or Rick's shame. He simply listened, a quiet observer of their pain and their newfound resolve. This meeting wasn't about the past. It was about the future. They were no longer two separate parties. They were a team with a single mission to expose the truth and bring Shadow home. The strategy was simple but dangerous. They had to prove that Shadow was not a liability to be sold, but a key piece of evidence in a criminal investigation. Jonathan, with his deep knowledge of canine training, knew exactly where to start. He led them to the retired police chief, an old friend of Marcus Thorne. The chief, initially hesitant, was moved by the sight of Rick and Maria, two people fighting for justice for a man he had admired. He agreed to help, but only with a subtle off-the-record look at the evidence room. This is where the plot takes a crucial, unexpected turn. In a dusty evidence locker, amidst Marcus's personal effects, they found a small, unmarked flash drive. It contained a single unedited video file from Shadow's body camera, a piece of technology Marcus was testing for the department. The footage was grainy, but it captured the final moments of his life. It showed Marcus and Shadow clearing the warehouse, the air thick with the smell of illicit chemicals. The raid was spiraling out of control. Marcus, bleeding and desperate, looks at Shadow one last time and says a single unusual command: "Go get it, boy." The camera footage ends there, but a small detail is missing. In the chaos of the scene, Shadow, following his specific, highly advanced training, was commanded to retrieve a crucial piece of evidence, a single vial of the new designer drug. He didn't just escape the warehouse. He carried the evidence of the entire conspiracy with him. He was not just a symbol of the past. He was the living proof of the truth. Suddenly, everything fell into place. Silas Vance didn't just want Shadow gone. He needed to find what the dog was carrying. The bidding war was a ruse to get the dog into his custody, where he could be disposed of and his evidence could be found. The fight was no longer a simple custody battle. It was a race against a powerful, ruthless opponent who had no intention of stopping until he found what Shadow had hidden. The stakes were higher than ever, and with this new damning evidence, Maria, Rick, and Jonathan knew they were no longer fighting for a dog, they were fighting to finish Marcus's last mission. The hearing room at Silver Creek City Hall felt less like a courtroom and more like a coliseum. The air crackled with tension, packed with town council members, reporters, and citizens, all of them witnesses to a battle that had spiraled far beyond a single canine. In one corner stood Silas Vance, flanked by a team of high-powered lawyers. They were polished, prepared, and oozing an arrogant confidence. In the other corner sat Maria, Rick, and Leo, joined by Jonathan Reed. They had no fancy suits or legal degrees, only a flash drive and a fierce resolve. Vance's lawyers began their case with a cold corporate efficiency. They painted a picture of a dog in need of structure, a boy trapped by an unhealthy attachment, and a grieving family needing to move on. They argued for Shadow to be placed in Vance's highly structured care, where he could serve a valuable purpose and stop being a liability. The words were smooth, but the subtext was clear. This dog was a piece of property, and it belonged to them. But their narrative was about to be shattered. Rick, with a courage he hadn't known he possessed, was the first to speak. He stood and looked not at the council, but directly at Leo. His voice, once so full of doubt, was now steady and clear. He confessed his initial mistake, his belief that letting go of Shadow was the right thing to do. "I was wrong," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I saw a boy who needed to move on, but I didn't see a boy who was waiting for his hero to come home. This dog didn't anchor him to the past. He kept him tethered to hope, and for that, I am eternally grateful." The room murmured, caught off guard by his heartfelt honesty. Then Jonathan Reed took the floor. He didn't speak with emotion, but with the cold, hard logic of facts. He described Shadow's specific, unique training to detect the new drug, and then with a flourish, he placed a laptop on the table. "You believe this dog is a liability. We believe he is a witness," he said. He then played the body camera footage, the grainy video, the sounds of chaos, and Marcus Thorne's final desperate command: "Go get it, boy." The council members leaned in their expressions, shifting from polite interest to stunned realization. The footage ended, but the silence remained. This wasn't just a dog story anymore. It was the story of a hero's last stand. Maria then stood. She didn't have to say much. She spoke with a quiet, powerful grace about what her husband had fought for: truth, justice, and community. She looked at the council and said, "My husband died fighting for this, and now my son and I are ready to finish his fight." But the emotional climax came from the most unexpected person. The councilwoman turned to Leo, who had remained silent throughout the proceedings. "Leo," she said gently, "would you like to say anything?" For a moment, it seemed he wouldn't. He looked at his mother, at Rick, and then at Shadow, who was sitting beside him. He opened his mouth, and with a voice shaky but audible, he said, "My dad always told me that heroes never really leave. They just go on a new mission. And Shadow? Shadow is my dad's last mission, and I want to help him finish it." A tear slipped down Maria's cheek. The room fell into a stunned, emotional silence. The council deliberated for a moment, then came back with a vote, unanimous. Not only would Shadow be returned to Leo, but he would also be certified as a therapy dog, continuing his heroic work by helping other children who had experienced loss. As the room erupted in applause, Vance and his lawyers stormed out. But our story wasn't quite over. As they exited the building, a reporter shoved a microphone in Vance's face, asking about the newly revealed evidence. In a moment of pure arrogance, Vance laughed and said, "A dog's testimony. Please, my company is untouchable." The cameras, however, caught a critical detail. He looked down at his watch, and then for a split second, a look of pure, unadulterated panic crossed his face. The watch was a gift from the CEO of Lethbridge Pharmaceuticals, a signal that he had been in on the plot from the very beginning. It was the final, satisfying twist. The man who saw the dog as a liability was undone by a dog's heroism, a boy's courage, and a tiny hidden piece of technology. The fight was over, and the boy, the dog, and the truth had won. The final scene took place not in the sterile courtroom, but back in Leo's bedroom. The air was no longer heavy with grief, but light with a sense of peace. Leo sat on his bed, a sketchbook open on his lap. He wasn't drawing the past, but the future, a picture of him, Shadow, and a new friend. A little girl with a timid smile, a dog at her side. Shadow now, a certified therapy dog, was curled up at the foot of the bed, his head resting on Leo's foot, a steady warm weight of unwavering presence. As Leo's mother Maria watched him from the doorway, a quiet pride swelled in her heart. This story, she realized, wasn't just about a dog. It was about the incredible, often underestimated power of animal-human bonds in healing. In a world that often values logic and moving on, it was a profound testament to the fact that healing isn't about forgetting, but about holding on to the things that matter and learning to carry them forward. The family's journey had been a long and difficult one, filled with betrayal and uncertainty. But it also taught them a powerful truth. The light of justice will find a way to shine through the darkest of lies. Silas Vance had thought he was untouchable, but he was undone by a dog's unwavering loyalty, a boy's quiet courage, and the last brave act of a hero who was gone but not forgotten. And Rick's journey was a lesson in itself. He had made a mistake, a human, well-intentioned mistake. But his choice to fight for his family and for the truth showed that redemption is always possible. He went from a man who saw a dog as a liability to a man who saw him as the key to a boy's heart. This isn't a fairy tale. Leo's grief won't disappear overnight. But he has his best friend back. He has his voice back. And he has a new mission to help other children find their way out of the silence, guided by the paw prints of a hero's legacy. This story is a reminder of the extraordinary healing power our furry companions possess. If this story touched your heart, please consider donating to or volunteering at a local animal shelter or a therapy dog organization. You can help provide a lifeline to a child or an adult who needs it most. Have you ever experienced the incredible power of an animal to help you heal or get through a difficult time? Share your story with us in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next video.